Everyone, let's talk about everyone's favorite topic. Is taxation theft? I'm assuming if you've clicked on this video, you understand the importance of this question, right? Because if the very foundation of our society is built on something that's fundamentally wrong, like stealing, then we have a huge problem. And it's worth it for us to answer the question, is taxation theft? So, first, as always, we need to start with definitions. What is taxation? And we all know what that is, right? Mandatory collection of money to pay for government goods or services. Whether it's the military or the war on drugs or the fire department or bank bailouts or the war on Iraq, whatever, right? Now, how is taxation different from any other payment in the free market? The only real difference is that it's mandatory. It's not voluntary. So anything in the free market you don't have to buy. You don't have to buy a cheeseburger or a car or a house or even medicine or food or water. You do have to buy an N64, and that's where the entire argument falls apart. But besides that, you don't have to buy anything in the free market. Taxes, if you don't pay them, people in blue costumes will come to your door with guns and throw you in jail. So they're not voluntary, and even the fact that you get to vote for taxes doesn't change anything, really, fundamentally, and we'll get into why in just a second. But so now, next, what is theft? Well, we all know what that is too, right? It's the removal of someone's property or money without their consent, whether it's prior consent or consent right now. So I can't walk into a Taco Bell and ask for a triple chalupa and then get the taco and not pay for it. That would be stealing on my part, right? So Taco Bell could in that situation forcibly remove the 99 cents that I owe them, because in that situation I actually agreed to exchange money for a taco. So I mean, we all know this, right? We all know what theft is, really. You can't commit fraud in any transaction and then complain that you're being stolen from when your property is being taken without your consent, because really it's not your property because you agreed to give it up. So I'm sorry I just wasted time explaining something you already knew. Theft is taking someone's property wrongfully without their consent, right? So how is taxation theft? Well, it's pretty obvious, right? Taking someone's property without their consent. Taxes are not voluntary, they're mandatory. Your consent doesn't matter when it comes to paying taxes, whether you want to or not. You're going to go to jail. So that's the bare bones basic argument, but let's go into all of the counter arguments. So the most popular one is probably the whole consent of the governed social contract theory, and it goes something like this. Well, you're a citizen of this country, and by being here and being a member of society, you implicitly agree, right? You haven't left yet. So really, you sort of agree just by being a member of society. You imply consent by being here, right? Love it or leave it. And we all voted on it. We all agreed, right? So there's a lot packed in there that we need to unpack. So first of all, the whole idea of implied consent. And this only takes like 10 seconds of honest thought for you to wake up to what you already know, right? I can't say that I implied consent from my neighbor when I go to play croquet on his front lawn and he can't physically lift me up because I'm too heavy, right? Or he didn't leave his house, love it or leave it, because he stayed in his house, that he somehow agreed to me playing croquet on his front lawn. No. I mean, it's completely obvious. Trespassing is wrong. It's his property. It's his rules. I have no jurisdiction over his property. And that brings us to another important topic, is property rights. What does it mean to own property? Well, in this case, owning land or property, it means you get to do whatever you want with that property as long as you're not violating the non-aggression principle, right? Like, I can't kill people or rape them or kidnap them on my property, right? But I can do anything else to it. The whole concept of owning land is that it's your land, your rules. You can do whatever you want on that land. And if you want to remove someone from your land who you don't want to be there, that's your right as a landowner. Otherwise, what does it even mean to own land? So the whole concept that government has authority over your land, even if you own it, that they can enforce laws and taxes on your land, really flies completely in the face of property rights. Now, if government actually owned all of the land in the country, yeah, it would make sense that you're essentially renting from them and you have to abide by their rules. But it makes no sense that the government can come up with new laws or even old laws and claim jurisdiction over your property, right? Again, where does the authority come from? And that brings us to the next topic, democracy. A lot of people say, well, we all voted on these laws. We all agreed that we would abide by them, right? But when you say we, who are you talking about? Like, I know you're not talking about me because I don't vote and I never agreed to these laws. So there is no we. Be careful anytime you hear somebody saying we. They're just collectivizing and trying to make something as simple and obvious and bald-faced as theft into something wishy-washy and nice sounding. So the idea that democracy makes anything right or morally legitimate, I mean, come on. Like, what if there's an island with 11 people, 10 guys and 1 woman, voting on who's going to get raped, right? We all know, obviously, that vote doesn't make rape moral or legitimate at all, period. So why does anyone think the majority rule has anything to do with what's right or moral or legitimate, right? I don't care if 99.9% of people vote to rape somebody or to steal their property or to bulldoze their house. It doesn't make it right. So it has absolutely no legitimacy. Now you might hear the limited government conservatives saying, well, I don't believe in democracy either. I believe in a limited republic where we have a constitution that nobody can break, right? So that, yeah, a bunch of guys 100 years ago, hundreds of years ago, wrote on a piece of paper that I have the right to steal from you. Again, where does the authority come from? Like, it has nothing to do with property rights. It's completely arbitrary. I can't write on a piece of paper with all my buddies and with a lot of pomp and circumstance and tradition. I can't say, well, we hereby declare that you are a citizen of Ancapistan, and as such you abide by these rules, and by the way, these rules apply on top of your property. It makes no sense. I can't say that you can't paint your house pink or paint your lawn pink, right? The only people who have authority to make those decisions are you, or maybe your homeowners association, if you agreed to those rules prior. So these are all, I mean, shouldn't even need to be said, but they do, unfortunately. So another common counter argument is the idea that, well, the free market actually does force you, right? Like, you need food and water and medicine and shelter and a car. So it's really no different than the government forcing you, right? So here you need to remember that nature forcing you to do something is completely different than a person or people forcing you to do something. Like, if a hurricane comes and destroys your house, that's not right or wrong. That's amoral. But if a person does the same thing, yeah, we call that wrong. So yeah, it's terrible that some people need medicine to survive. Well, no, let's make it even more simple. We all need food and water to survive, right? But the people who provide filtered water and the farmers who grow food are not forcing us to buy their product. I'm glad that there are those people who are willing to live their life to provide me a service with, that are willing to voluntarily trade money for that good or service. So it's not wrong for somebody to ask payment for those services, right? Because if it's any different than that, if those people actually owe you, say, food or medicine or water or shelter or whatever, you have the right to forcibly remove that from them. Well, what is that? That sounds a lot like slavery, if you ask me. So another argument is the idea that because you get services for your taxes, that somehow that legitimizes it, right? That's like me going up to you with a gun, taking 50% of your money out of your wallet and giving you a back rub and saying, yeah, you got something for it, so it's not wrong, it's not stealing. And I mean, that takes less than 1 second. That takes negative time for you to realize how ridiculous and absurd it is. So, I mean, an easy way to test whether or not taxation is theft, we all have certain taxes that we don't like paying, right? Like, you might not like the war in Iraq or Afghanistan. You might not like the war on drugs. You might not like public schools, whatever. I'm sure there's something you can find. So just stop paying it and see what happens. People with guns will come to your door and lock you in a cage. And you never agreed to pay for those things, right? You might have voted in an election, but just because somebody threw you in a pig pen and said, here, you have 1/1,000,000th of a percentage point in terms of determining the outcome of this election, and determining the laws of this land and the taxes, that is not the same as consent. First, you never agreed to be in that situation at all to begin with. So, I mean, it should be completely obvious. There's no consent in government. Democracy doesn't make it so. The Constitution doesn't make it so. It's all just as simple and basic as, yes, I agree to this. No, I don't agree to this. And we need to clear the fog, this concept that people somehow imply consent because they they were born in a country and born into a system. It's complete nonsense. So, yeah, there's always the question of how are we going to run society without taxes? Who's going to build the roads? Who's going to protect the poor? Who's going to protect us from foreign invaders? And those are legitimate questions and they need to be answered. But at least have the courage and honesty to admit that you believe that we need theft to have a functioning society. It doesn't matter how those things are going to be handled, right? It's essentially you're saying, well, who would pick the cotton? And people, anarchists like myself, are saying it doesn't matter who's going to pick the cotton. We'll take care of it somehow. But slavery is wrong. And in this situation, I'm telling you, theft is wrong. So please at least be willing to admit that simple, basic premise, that taking someone's property without their consent is theft, period.